Welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please welcome your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show, the only internet radio show dedicated to giving you real solutions to improve your health. Not only are they real solutions, but they're natural solutions as well, because as you know, the one and only true wealth you have is your health. I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc, and I'm committed to helping you find the root cause of your health problem, fix the cause with natural treatments, so you can feel normal again and live your life to the fullest. Today's topic is going to be practical information on medical marijuana. I'm so very excited about today's show because my special guest is Morgan Toombs. Let me tell you a little about her. Morgan is the nurse manager of Canada's first nurse practitioner-led medical marijuana clinic called O Cannabis Clinic. She is a multi-published author, Humanitarian Award winner for exceptional nursing care, as well as an award-winning adult educator. Morgan is passionate about helping Canadians navigate the confusing medical marijuana landscape and believes that Canadians should have affordable and timely access to medical marijuana, even if they live in the Yukon. Morgan, thank you so much for being my special guest today on this episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Morgan, what actually got you into this arena of medical marijuana? And for the listeners out there, I'm going to switch to saying medical cannabis because it's just so much easier.
For sure. Yeah, so being in this industry was definitely not on my list of things to do. It really fell into my lap. My best friend has had 3 hip surgeries and was having issues with pain despite it being several years after his surgeries and issues sleeping. And so we realized, let's get him some medical cannabis because we heard such good things about it for pain and for sleep. And so we booked an appointment, got a referral, booked an appointment, went to the clinic and got this prescription for him. And in the whole process, it took about 6 hours. So us driving an hour, and then in the clinic was about 3.5. And so we got the medicine, and then within a week, he was basically a different person, and was sleeping better, had no pain, was chipper, and just the pronounced difference was profound. And so I realized this is really good medicine. And yeah, so that's really what, like, the push into the industry is, like, everybody needs to hear about this. Everybody needs to at least have an understanding that it's an opportunity for medicine for patients. And yeah, that's why.
I can't agree with you more about that, because in my private practice at Functional Medicine Ontario, I'm getting more and more patients who have questions about this. And I'm, this is still relatively new information for me as a doctor, and I think I'm pretty on top of things. So I can imagine for the other health providers out there, it's hard, There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I'm hoping with our interview today we can kind of, get through some of that stuff. And then, of course, there's a lot of, how should I say this, the research on marijuana, too.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that, but
sure.
But yeah, I've had some patients lately who I've said, okay, we've tried X, Y, and Z. Have you ever considered medical cannabis? And they'll look at me and they'll say, oh, actually, yes, I have, but then I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we start with, what are some of the most common ailments people seek medical cannabis for?
Yeah, so the top 3 for sure, bar none, are chronic pain, insomnia, or sleep disturbances, either trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or both, and anxiety. So those are the 3 big ones that we get the most patients coming through our clinic for. There's a lot of other complaints. There's it's indicated for cancer-related nausea, cancer-related anorexia, It's related for, it's indicated for childhood, well, not indicated, but we have patients that come through for childhood epilepsy where nothing else works. We've had a really good experience with patients with that. There's a whole host of issues, but the big ones, to avoid confusing your listeners, is pain. Most people can relate with pain, anxiety, and or insomnia.
And then one of the things that I learned recently at a webinar on medical cannabis was that there is research on it being helpful also for autoimmune disease, for multiple, or not multiple, but multiple chemical sensitivity, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. So like you said, there's a whole host of things. I believe it's McMaster that's doing a research study on some of that too. It's incredible. Like, there's tons and tons of research that's coming out of Canada that's really, really cool. We're actually going to be doing a menopausal research study. It's really indicated for women who are wrestling with menopause. And so with the hot flashes, the weight gain, the hormonal and mood swings, so it's quite indicated, and quite quickly the patients experience improvement. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about the research? Because it's my understanding that, I don't know, is it North America or in the U.S., like government funding cannot go towards medical cannabis, and most of the research is done in Europe, actually? Like, what is going on there?
So, there's a lot of research in Europe. There's a ton of research coming out of Israel. There's, I was watching a documentary recently about the research in the U.S. as well, and I'm not super familiar with the laws in the U.S. around medical marijuana and researching it, so I can't really speak to that. But there's definitely a lot of research being done on medical marijuana. There are different types of hoops, though, that people have to jump through. Like, for example, in Quebec, you can only ever get access to medical marijuana if you're a part of a research study. A lot of the research studies that are being done, because it's plant medicine, it's challenging to do a double-blind, like a controlled double-blind placebo study. You know, like, it's having something that is a clinical trial is quite challenging. So a lot of the research that's out there, certainly within Canada, is observational. So it's based on the one person's individual story, and then a whole bunch of those people. Yeah. And
so I guess for the listeners out there, and also health practitioners, that there is research, and it's a growing field. And even if we just have a case study of just one patient and their one story and how medicinal marijuana or medical cannabis, really improved their health issues, that right there is research evidence.
Totally, yeah. And we were doing, we're working on doing a research study with a prominent Toronto university. A good friend of mine is the director of research, or the assistant director of research there. And so we were talking about what specifically in medical cannabis we'd be doing. And one of the things that I was reminded in that conversation, and I'm not entirely sure how I forgot about it, because I was one of her students in nursing, and so the good clinical evidence is based on many different factors, and it seems like in our industry right now what people are focusing on is the clinical trials, like what they do in pharma. And so research in that capacity is really only 25% of good clinical-based evidence. And so as health professionals, our job is to make our decisions on good clinical evidence. So it's not just the research that is good clinical evidence. There's four pillars, and so there's three other ones that it seems like in the conversation about cannabis gets pushed to the wayside. So one pillar, as I said, is research. The second pillar is clinical judgment, professional's opinion. And then the two pillars are based on the patient's, one is the experience and the patient's preference. So patient experience and patient preference make up 50% of good clinical evidence. And so if a patient is wanting to get medical cannabis and their preference is that and their experience is good, of course it's a beautiful thing for patients to be getting access to it. And so I really appreciate that we're having this conversation about research, because it seems like in the media they really talk a lot about, there's no research on medical cannabis, but there is. All of those research studies are based on one person, and all those one people make up a group of people that are then turned into numbers and then turned into a research report.
Yeah,
even the clinical trials.
Yeah, and it just keeps growing from there. But it all starts with one doctor's thought or one patient's experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just grows.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've kind of covered some of the most common complaints, so again, pain, anxiety, sleep issues.
Yep.
Okay, so I know you probably get these questions all the time, Morgan, but does it make you high? Is it addictive? Is it going to kill your memory? Is it going to kill your brain? Does it make you stupid? And do you have to smoke it?
Right. Yeah, really good questions. And these are questions that are very valid fears for people, very valid like obstacles and questions that circulate in their brain. And we get asked them all the time. So first question, does it make you high? Well, it can. So marijuana is composed of over 100 different cannabinoids that comprise the marijuana, the medicine. And so only one out of over the 100 is a psychoactive compound that creates euphoria or that feeling or sensation of feeling high. So there's only one, and there's over 100 other ones that do not do that. So when if the lens that a person is viewing marijuana through is through an old lens, an old dirty lens of, the 60s where it's like getting high and stoned, that's for sure, that's the intention of it. The intention of medicine, so that's recreational. The intention of medicine is not to get a person high. The intention of medicine is to do what medicine is designed to do, which is to help relieve symptoms. And so does it make you high? It can. Part of being a medical cannabis patient, though, is medical monitoring and getting the right dose for the person's body. And so we don't know what that is. We work with patients to make sure that we start them at the lowest possible dose and then increase it to get to the lowest effective dose. And so for some of our patients, they don't ever get high because of the different compounds in it. It's not just a THC product. There's a whole bunch of other cannabinoids in their marijuana that allow them to get the healing benefits without feeling high or stupid or, disoriented. To speak to the kills your brain cells. So again, if the intention is about getting high and smoking a person's brains out, then very likely one would. I mean, even drinking alcohol can kill brain cells. So it's. I think that the framework is less about, or the lens is less about killing brain cells. It's about well, what's the lens that we're using? So with recreational for sure, with medical. Again, with the cannabinoids, cannabidiol, which is CBD, it's actually, there's good evidence that points to it being a neuroprotectant and a neuroregenerative. So there's Alzheimer's patients using cannabis. There's research studies out there that explore there's good benefits to that. Concussion, post-concussion syndrome, it can help with that. So helping the brain. And so I would say when it's used medically, no. When it's used recreationally, that's a different story. In terms of the addiction, so we get this question a lot as well, because I think, again, people are looking at marijuana or cannabis as from that old lens, from that old framework of, it's just a recreational drug. So it could be addictive like alcohol or nicotine or sugar. I used to work when I was living in Toronto at an addiction center, and so my colleagues, we were discussing what addiction is, and we recognize that everybody has addictions. Maybe not in the pronounced capacity of needing to go to an addiction center, but we all have some type of addiction. Whether it's watching TV or exercising or eating sugar, or eating cookies, or washing our hands, or playing on our cell phones, or playing on Facebook. We all have different things that we do in a kind of an addictive way. So is it addictive? It's proven to be less addictive than nicotine, alcohol, and coffee. So I would say, is it addictive? Anything can be addictive.
That's pretty profound, because I just got off of coffee and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And And yeah, I was not a fun person to be around for 3 days. But yeah, the fact that there's proven evidence that its addictive capacity is extremely low.
Yeah.
Means that it's very safe to use.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were saying that medical cannabis, there's many different components. So I think of this like it's like any other type of herb. There's many different components within that herb, and that's why that herb as a whole works so well. But when you extract one single component, and purify it, and then make that into a prescription medicine, then we start seeing issues happening. Right. And then the other thing, can you talk about endocannabinoids? Like, we have cannabinoids within our body already, right? Naturally.
Yep. So we all, as human beings, this was discovered in the 90s, so very recently, we have an endocannabinoid system. So our bodies are designed to receive cannabinoids. As you say, we have cannabinoids in our system naturally. So a lot of people don't realize that we're actually designed to receive cannabis or cannabinoids. So did that answer your question?
Yeah. I just thought it's really interesting that from a cellular level, there are receptors for these cannabinoids. So it kind of makes sense, this more natural approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like that's how we're built.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we age, the effectiveness of our ability to produce our own cannabinoids deteriorates, so it makes sense to supplement.
Okay, so what is different about O Cannabis Clinic, and what does O Cannabis Clinic do?
So, as you said when you were reading my bio, the O Cannabis Clinic is the first nurse practitioner-led clinic in Canada. So, and we're a pretty new clinic. We work with patients right across from Yukon to Newfoundland and everywhere in between. And as we were getting started in this space with the nurse practitioner model, I called all of the colleges of nurses across Canada because I wanted to, one, let them know what we're doing, and two, find out what the regulations are in each of the provinces and territories, and three, find out what their thoughts were about it. And right across the board, unanimously, the colleges of nurses were very happy with what we're doing, because it's very hard for Canadians to get access to cannabis without paying an arm and a leg. So, for example, in Yukon, which is where I'm from, it costs patients about $400 or $500 just to get a script. Like, it's a very isolated part of Canada, and there's no doctors up there, or very few, if any, who actually prescribe, because, for various reasons. So patients have to actually go somewhere else to get their medicine. So without having to, buy a flight or they can, do it in some other kind of way, but it costs a lot of money. And so, so what we do at O Cannabis, as I was stepping into the space, and as my boss was building the business, what we were searching for was where are the gaps in the industry. And so right now, one of the gaps is, was and still is, patients getting access to timely medicine. Two is the follow-up care. So medical cannabis is a very different bag of beans than any other type of pharmaceutical medicine. So with pharmaceutical medicines, you go to your doctor, you get a script, you go to the pharmacy, and then you fulfill the script. With medical marijuana, it is not that easy. You can go get to your doctor to get a script, but then what do you do with it? You have to find a pharmacy, quote unquote, which is in the world of medical marijuana, it's a licensed producer. And so there's about 57 right now licensed producers across Canada, and only a handful of them are taking patients or licensed to be able to sell to patients, and then fewer still who are actually accepting new patients because they want to fulfill their obligations to the current patients that they have. So most patients don't realize that that's the hurdle that they have to get over once they get their script or their authorization document, more specifically, from their physician. So we realized, okay, that's a big gap in the industry. And then the follow-up care, well, one of the things I love so much about medical cannabis, over and above it being such an effective medicine, is that it's really the patient is the one who decides how much they need to take. And so if somebody, for example, is prescribed 2 grams a day, well, we don't have them gobble 2 grams a day. Like if you get a script from your physician, and you're prescribed 0.5 grams, 4 times a day, there's specific times that you take it, and then you know that you've done your job as a patient and you've taken the medicine like a good patient. And so, but with medical marijuana, just because a patient is given 2 grams doesn't mean that they're going to take all of it ever, and certainly not in the first day. So it's a teaching the patient about how to self-titrate. And so we start our patients really, really low. So start low, go slow is the slogan in the industry. And they increase the dose based on how they're feeling. So we can't crawl inside of somebody else's body and feel how they're feeling. So we teach them how to really wrap their hands around what they're experiencing inside, and then they communicate that to us through a patient journal. And then we have nurses that call our patients on a monthly basis to ensure that they're getting the right follow-up care. And that was a huge gap that we still find in the industry, where patients are not getting the right medicine. They're spending a bunch of money and not getting the right medicine. Or they're, for example, we had a patient who had cancer, and they were on just cannabidiol, just CBD. Well, with cancer, they need to be on THC and CBD, but nobody gave them education about what they needed to be on. And so to answer your question about what O Cannabis Clinic does is we monitor our patients. We see our patient. They don't need to have a doctor's referral. We see a wide variety of patients in clinic and through telemedicine. 2, we make sure that the patient is actually eligible for medical marijuana. So we don't work with recreational patients. We only work with patients that are in need of a medical cannabis script. And then we monitor our patients every step of the way. We make sure that they get connected to the right licensed producer, so the right, quote unquote, plant pharmacy for their medicine. And they are able to get the right strains, the right method of ingestion, so whether it's oil or flower. And then we answer all of their questions about, oh my gosh, well, how do I dose this? What do I do? Because it's very different, and there's still stigma around cannabis. So the business was designed to hold the hand, so of the CEO, to hold the hand of the of if their mom was going through the process, what would they want their mom to experience every step of the way? So it would be an enjoyable, easy, and effortless experience.
So listeners, you can clearly see this is why I said, Morgan, will you please be on my podcast to explain this? Because you guys, your clinic, like you said, you saw these gaps, and it's one thing to get the prescription, and you have your prescription, little piece of paper in your hand.
Yeah.
But then what do you do next? And so that's what your clinic does. And I know we have so much more to talk about. So listeners, we will have a part 2 to this because we do have so much more to talk about. But even what you said is, you the patient, you have this script. What do you do next? You can't just go to your Shoppers Drug Mart or a regular pharmacy. Mm-hmm. You what is the difference between a licensed producer and these cannabis dispensaries? They kind of pop up here and there, and then they close their doors. And then of course street dealers.
Yeah, we get this question a lot, and sometimes we don't get the question, but people they think that they know the answer. So I'm so glad that you asked this question. So a licensed producer is the organizations that are legally able to sell medicine to medical cannabis patients. So the patient has to be a registered patient of theirs, and then they can sell the medicine to the patient. And what that means is the patient can travel on airplanes, buses, trains, wherever in Canada. They're able to travel with it. They're able to use their medicine, as medicine. Whereas a dispensary, and so the dispensaries are those places that you can walk into. They pop up, as you say, all over the place. Certainly here in Ontario, they pop up and they close down all the time. And so it confuses people because a lot of people think, okay, well, once I get my script, just like when I go to the doctor, once I get my script, then I can go to a dispensary and buy my medicine. Well, what patients don't realize is that federally, that all is illegal. Dispensaries are illegal. The only way that a person can get medical marijuana is to have it mailed to their door. And so a patient walking in with a script, even if it's from a licensed healthcare provider, it's that act of walking in and buying it from a dispensary, which is not approved to sell medicine, even though they position themselves as being approved to sell medicine, that's illegal. So when we were researching this business, I was very shocked and surprised because because of the positioning that those places put them. They tell patients, oh yeah, well, we see cancer patients and we see pain patients and we see blah blah blah, and yet at the end of the day, there's no healthcare provider that's in there. Or I've never been in one that has a healthcare provider, and then the strains that they're selling are recreational strains. So we don't even know what's in them. Like the licensed producers create lab reports. They get tested by Health Canada. There's 3 visits per month per licensed producer where they're testing things out to make sure it's all sound, that it's good medicine for patients. Things can get recalled if they test poorly. So there's a lot of safeguards with a licensed producer, and there's zero safeguards and quite a lot of risk with dispensaries. And so it's very it's such a good question. When we're talking about the street dealers, and I was with our patients, the air quotes of street pharmacist. You never know what you're going to get. We have several patients that have been recreationally self-medicating, or not recreational, well, yeah, self-medicating, but having to get recreational stuff. And because what they're getting is there's no regulations on it, there's no understanding of what specifically they're buying. What they're getting is different every single time. So with somebody with anxiety, for example, giving them a strain that increases anxiety is, not a good thing. And yet there's no control when buying from either a dispensary or a street pharmacist, or a street dealer. And so, in my point of view, because both are illegal, if a dispensary is just a more glamorous version of a street dealer. And that just is, whereas a licensed producer is a credible, they've paid a lot of money, and they've jumped through a lot of hoops in order to be eligible to sell medical cannabis to patients, and they also have there's a rigorous process that is in a consistency process that happens to ensure that the medicine that they're delivering is good quality medicine. So they're 2 hugely different places where people can purchase. The difference, though, the biggest difference is that from a licensed producer, you have to be a medical cannabis patient. With a dispensary or a street dealer, they'll just take whomever.
And so again, for the listeners, when you hear that term licensed producer, you should understand that is the pharmacy. That is the medical cannabis pharmacy. Mm-hmm. And Morgan, so you mentioned Health Canada testing. So they go out, you said 3 times a month to these producers and test their cannabis. Do you know, what do they measure? Are they looking for mold? Are they looking for pesticides? Are they specifically looking for THC levels, cannabinoid levels?
That's a really good question. I'm not, I don't work in a licensed producer, so I only know certain things about it from what some colleagues in the space talk about. So what I know for sure is that there's 3 pop-up visits, so unscheduled visits that Health Canada will deliver upon the licensed producers on a monthly basis. So one of them being checking out their technologies and such to ensure that all of the patient information is secure and sound. One is to test the medicine to make sure that there's they do test for pesticides and things like that could potentially be harmful for Canadians. So they're testing to ensure the safety. From my understanding. And then the third one is, I can't remember what the third one is. It's related to something with, I can't remember what the third one is, but there's 3 pop-up visits specifically to ensure that this is like a sound environment, both for the patients, for what they're delivering to the patients and such. For the medicine itself, I don't believe that Health Canada would be testing for what cannabinoids and what terpenes and what the percentages of the cannabis are. I think that would rest more on the shoulders of the licensed producer, who would definitely want to know because, one, it's their product, they're selling it to their patients, and and that's really also based, I think, on strains, different clones that they're buying. I should connect you to some people that work in that space so they can give you more thorough answers than I have.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had mentioned earlier that so you get your prescription. It has to be filled by a licensed producer. Now you don't just drive up to the licensed producer, do you?
Correct. No, even if you have a script. So say I was registered with Organigram, for example. So Organigram is one of the licensed producers, and they're in Moncton. So say I'm in Moncton, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go buy my cannabis from Organigram today. I'm just gonna go check out what they got and just go pick up something, and I'll fly it home with me when I go back to Ontario. So even with my script, and even if I walked up to the doors of Organigram, they could not sell it to me, even though I'm a patient of theirs. They cannot physically give me marijuana. So what that means is there's a whole mailing process. There's a whole shipping and mailing process that happens. So once a patient gets their script, then it's faxed over to their licensed producer of choice, and so that's the clinic's job. And the patient has to register to become a patient of that licensed producer. And then it takes a few days for the registration and the medical document to be put together on the licensed producer side, where they're crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's and making sure that the patient is who they say they are, that the provider who created the authorization document is who they say they are and are authorized to prescribe, and all of those kinds of things. Then, and only then, is the patient fully registered to be able to order medicine. And so that's just step one. Step two is for them to either phone in to the licensed producer or go onto the website and then order their medicine through an online web store. And then from there, they would get it shipped to their home. And it needs to be signed. It's typically sent through Canada Post, like Express Post. There's some licensed producers that will ship it through Purolator or other methods, but it needs to be signed at the receiving end because it's medical marijuana.
So really, there's this whole system of checks and balances that have to go on to make sure that everything is above board, legal, and that what you're getting is a safe product. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And okay, so earlier you had said, there are only so many licensed producers, and some of them are not accepting patients because they're just full. And some are still accepting patients. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to end our interview here, and we're going to answer that question on part 2 of our interview. Plus, so many more questions. We have so much more to talk about, don't we, Morgan?
We sure do.
Okay, so Morgan, at this point, if any of our listeners want to find out more about O Cannabis Clinic, where can they go?
So our website is O Cannabis Clinic, just like our anthem, O Cannabis.com, ocannabisclinic.com.
And that's just an O, that's not an OH, because I thought it was OH, but I'm American, so.
Yes, just OCANNABIS clinic.com.
Okay, and I'll make sure that information is in the podcast notes so that you can easily find that website. Morgan, thank you so much for being my special guest today. This has been an awesome interview so far.
Thank you for having me. Excited for part 2.
Okay, so all right, that wraps up this very special episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show with Morgan Toombs. I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today, and I'd like to invite you back next time for another episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc. Have a great week, everyone.
You've been listening to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please tell your friends about the Functional Medicine Radio Show, and we'll see you next week with more from Dr. Carri.